The ancient Egyptians are known for having one of the most fascinating civilizations in history. Yet we have no idea what happened to them. They just kinda disappeared after the conquest of Alexander the Great. So what if they never did? What if the earth still had pharaohs? Let's find out. Ancient Egypt lasted for over 3,000 years, making it the longest-lasting civilization in history. Yet we know very little about it. For one thing, their writing system was incredibly complex, and it wasn't until recently that we've actually been able to read it. And even now, there are many theories about exactly what these texts say. What is certain is that the Egyptian civilization rose in the 31st century BCE when the upper and lower parts of Egypt were unified. Over the next several centuries, Egypt became a powerful empire controlling Nubia in the south and the Levant in the north. However, beginning in the 12th century BC, Egypt would no longer be independent. The first foreign power to conquer Egypt was the Hyksos. The Hyksos were a mysterious people who came from Anatolia and founded a new capital in the Egyptian delta. They ruled for only a short time before being defeated by another power, the Assyrians. Ancient Egyptian society was largely unchanged under Assyrian rule, but soon after the Assyrians, another power would come to dominate the region, the Persians. And like the previous conquerors, the Persian Empire would attempt to change Egyptian society. They attempted to force the Egyptians into submission, and they tried to replace traditional Egyptian gods with Zoroastrianism. The Egyptians would not accept this, however, and they rebelled against the Persians, winning their independence in 405 BC. But this would not last for long. A new power would soon sweep across the region, the Ptolemaic Kingdom. This was a Greek kingdom founded by one of Alexander the Great's generals after Alexander conquered the region in 332 BC. The Ptolemies ruled over Egypt for almost 300 years, during which Alexandria became the capital of the Hellenistic world. In 148 BC, the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt died and the country was annexed by Rome. The Roman occupation of Egypt led to the end of the ancient Egyptian civilization, or did it? What if the Egyptians successfully defended themselves against the Roman invasion? If this were the case, Egypt would become an isolated state cut off from the rest of the Mediterranean world. This would allow Egyptian culture to flourish for many more years, perhaps even until the Middle Ages. By this point, ancient Egyptian culture had already incorporated many elements from other cultures, such as the worship of various Greek and Roman gods. It's possible that if Egypt remained isolated, they may have eventually syncretized all of these gods into the Egyptian pantheon. This could have led to an entirely new form of polytheism that combined elements of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman religion. However, this isolation would also cause Egypt to stagnate. Without outside trade, Egypt would become a poor country stuck in the past. It's possible that ancient Egypt would have a similar fate to the modern nation of Ethiopia, which was also stuck in the past due to its geographic isolation. In fact, the ancient Egyptians could have even seen the Roman invasion as a crusade to modernize Egypt and bring it into the modern world. But Egypt's isolation wouldn't last forever. Eventually, Egypt would be conquered by one of the great powers of the medieval world, the Arabs. But what if the Egyptians managed to repel the Arab armies? Well, without outside influence, it's likely that the Egyptians would have slowly adopted Islam. Even today, there are many similarities between ancient Egyptian religion and Islam. Both religions are polytheistic and both have a strong emphasis on the afterlife. It's possible that if Egypt had remained independent, they would have adopted Islam much earlier than they actually did. And who knows? Perhaps one day Egypt will become a great Islamic power once again. But let's imagine that Egypt didn't go down either of these paths. Instead, ancient Egypt continued to be a pagan country well into the Middle Ages. As the Roman and Greek empires fell apart, the Egyptian pharaohs would become increasingly autocratic. The old nomad system, which divided Egypt into several small states, would reappear. This would lead to a period of instability, but ultimately a new capital would be founded and Egypt would enter the medieval period as a collection of small city-states. During the High Middle Ages, the various Egyptian princes would constantly fight amongst each other. However, one of these principalities would emerge dominant, the Principality of Alexandria. By the 14th century, Alexandria controlled most of Egypt, and the principality as ruler was even able to claim the title of pharaoh. Yet the rise of the Alexandrian principality would spell doom for the other Egyptian principalities. The various princes allied themselves with the incoming Mongol hordes, hoping to defeat the Alexandrian prince. But this would backfire, and the Mongols would soon conquer all of Egypt. Perhaps the pharaoh's army would be able to defeat the Mongols, however, and Egypt would enter the early modern period as a powerful state. By this point, Egypt would be far behind the rest of the world. Their technology and weapons would be inferior, and their knowledge of science and mathematics would be outdated. However, this wouldn't matter much. Egypt's geography would protect it from invasion, allowing the Egyptians to develop along their own path. But what would this path look like? Well, it's possible that ancient Egyptian society would continue to develop along its current trajectory. Perhaps the Egyptians would develop a version of classical mechanics based on the principles of physics discovered by Heron of Alexandria. This could lead to the development of machines such as cranes, gears, and lathes. But what about gunpowder? Ancient Egyptian society had many things necessary to develop gunpowder, such as a knowledge of chemistry and an abundance of saltpeter. However, they never developed it, perhaps because they didn't have the necessary spark. Gunpowder would change the world forever, and without it, the Egyptians would remain an isolated and backwards nation. Still, Egypt would become a regional power, controlling much of the Levant and Nubia. The Egyptian pharaohs would become rich and powerful, but they would also become incredibly decadent. As the centuries passed, the Egyptian pharaohs would live more and more luxurious lifestyles, living in massive palaces and wasting their money on pointless projects. But this would not last forever. In the 19th century, European colonialism would begin and Egypt would be targeted by one of the great colonial powers, the British Empire. The Egyptian army would be no match for the British, and soon the pharaoh would be forced to abdicate. A British protectorate would be established over Egypt, and Egypt would be drawn into World War I on the side of the British. After the war, Egypt would gain independence, but it would soon be plunged into turmoil. During the interwar period, Egypt would suffer from political instability and economic depression. And when World War II began, Egypt would be occupied by the Germans. Only with the help of the Americans would Egypt be liberated, but the damage would already be done. Without the support of the British, Egypt would become a weak nation in the modern world. Perhaps today Egypt would be another failed state in the Middle East. So what do you think? How would ancient Egyptian society develop if they never disappeared? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.